Hello. Today we're going to be dissecting a sheep brain to get an idea of what it looks like and what the brain looks like. Well, before we dissect it, we want to look through the different parts. You see down here at the, this is the bottom of the brain, which we would call the ventral surface. You can see certain components fairly okay, and others not so much. So a lot of the nerves are very small and difficult to see. We see little remnants of nerves, cranial nerves. The largest one here is the olfactory. We can see this one fairly well. That's this here. And this connects, we know, directly to the limbic system. Now, we look at the surface, and it's really wildly different than a human brain in terms of size and structure. We know that humans have like one of the largest brain-to-body ratio sizes on the planet. But we also see, for instance, here that there's different things that are really pronounced. So here's the frontal lobe areas, right? This part here. Parietal lobe is back here. Occipital lobe, where we expect it. And then our temporal lobe is this little tiny piece here. Temporal lobe in the sheep's brain is heavily taken up by the hippocampus. Now here we have our cerebellum. We see a little bit of the pia still connected to it. The last layer of the brain, the pia mater, which is mostly removed at this point. But we know the brain has 3 layers around it. The largest, thickest is the dura, the arachnoid, and then directly against the brain is the pia. And we can still see some remnants of that here. Here we have we call the quadrigemina, the superior and inferior colliculi, the pons and the medulla, and the cerebellum. So we can see the external surface, clearly missing a number of the landmarks that human brains have. And the next thing we want to do is to start cutting into the brain. And so we're going to make an incision right along here. This is the central sulcus. So we're going to cut through here, nice and carefully. And what we see is that separates really easily until we get to here, right? Where we have the corpus callosum. And I just severed that. That's this thick band of white matter that's connecting right here the left and right hemispheres. And so we're going to continue cutting pretty much midline through here to separate the left and right hemispheres. We can see there's some blood vessels here, nothing we're particularly concerned with. Looks like the pineal gland back here. See this little bump right here should be that. There's only one, like a lot of the brain structures are mirrored, but there's only one pineal gland. Now on the bottom of the brain, I've cut through this structure right here. This is white matter structure here. This is the olfactory nerve. I'm sorry, the optic nerve. This is cranial nerve number 2. Olfactory is 1, cranial 2 is the optic. And this is where you have the optic chiasm, where the nerves from the left and right eyes cross, so that the visual field information, not the information from the eye, the right eye doesn't go to the left side of the brain in terms of processing in the occipital lobe. The right visual field goes to the left side of the brain. And if you were to cover one eye, you would see that you still see left of center with your right eye and right of center with your left eye. Well, this information crosses here. So I'm going to cut through here and get a nice, section of of each lobe. And I'm going to cut through the rest of these structures here, the mammillary body, this little bump right here. That's actually pretty close to the hypothalamus. And I'm cutting through now the pons, medulla. It's the brainstem. I'm going to cut through the cerebellum. And there we go. There's our 2 separate hemispheres. So now we're into the this part of the brain. This is the sagittal, and I'm holding this upside down. So let me make it right side up. So here is the surface of the brain, correct side up. And here we have the cerebellum, this section here, and inside the cerebellum we can see this nice white matter band. And it looks kind of like a tree, and that's convenient because they named it the arbor vitae, which means tree of life. We see the brainstem, this widened area being the medulla, even wider the pons. This little bump right here, this kind of widening is the pons, means bridge, the basic connection between the thalamus and the rest of the brainstem and the cerebellum. Now, we want to start going through this, these structures, because the outside, we can look at the lobes, and we don't see much. We see this tissue separating the, kind of covering the ventricles here, the septum pellucidum. And in here, this kind of empty space isn't really empty space. It's just empty right now because there's no cerebrospinal fluid. But in here, sometimes we can even pull out this tissue, which, yep, the choroid plexus, which is what actually produces the cerebrospinal fluid. So I just kind of like yanked this stuff out, and that's what that is. It creates the cerebrospinal fluid. So in here, we can see some more structure. And as we go down, we would say, okay, we can still see the frontal lobe, parietal lobe, the cingulate, and this white band here is thick, and this is the corpus callosum, connects the left and right hemispheres. The rest is basically separate. They're pretty much touching, but they're not really, right? Okay, so this big thing here is awesome. This is the thalamus. This like kind of like holds it all together, right? Sometimes there's a little adhesion here, which appears to connect the two sides of the thalamus, the two halves, but it's the interthalamic adhesion doesn't actually connect them. The connections like kind of go and then turn around and come back. So each thalamus is separate there, but there are commissures connecting them. So here we see this bump here, the this cranial nerve 2, the optic chiasm, mammillary body down here. Under the thalamus is the hypothalamus, and down here would be, which we don't see, the infundibulum, which connects the hypothalamus to the pituitary gland, right? So you got the pineal gland, which was that little bump that we saw, that like on the other hemisphere it's connected to now here, and this connects the this produces like melatonin and hormones. The hypothalamus is heavily involved in hormone production, as is the mammillary body, involved in feeding. And so the pituitary, which would be around here, kind of separated by some skull sinuses, would be involved in producing those hormones. So the major structures that we care about are those, right? So we've got the thalamus, we've got the hypothalamus, mammillary body, and this is all brainstem stuff, right? Pons, midbrain, right? And we see some kind of basically, some connections coming up through the cortex. Now, as we go through here, we see we can see the top of the thalamus right below the ventricle. And this tissue wrapping around the thalamus is the fornix. The fornix was also going to kind of run into like the hippocampus. And so there's a lot of these tissues that kind of like wrap around the thalamus. The striatum, globus pallidus, right? These are all functional, right? And in this area here. But their function isn't quite as specified, right? Thalamus, white matter tracts connecting to everything. So now we're going to take off various parts so we can see more. So let's remove the cerebellum. And now we see back here, these are this is one half of the quadrigemina, right? Quad meaning 4. And so you have the superior and inferior colliculus. These are active in terms of the automatic processes of vision and auditory processing. So your superior colliculus, if something catches your eye and all of a sudden you're orienting towards something, paying attention to something, that's this. If something catches your attention auditorily, that's your inferior colliculus, right? These are those automatic processes. And this is also part of where the inferior colliculus, you've got your auditory tract running through there. your superior colliculus, not all of your visual tract, so only part of it runs through. Your visual tract is split between going directly to the occipital lobe and then the superior colliculus doing some of those automatic visual things. Again, the drawing of the attention. So we've got there, and now if we want to see the thalamus a little more, we're going to cut through here and try to remove. So here's the basal forebrain, which is pretty close to your limbic system, and we kind of come in here, and we kind of look, and we see, okay, you see these like really strong tracts running through here. What we're going to look for, and maybe we'll find, is the hippocampus. But this is a little tough. So the sheep, in humans, this here, the temporal lobe is huge by comparison. We've got all of our language, a lot of our language processing there. The sheep's got like what, ba? I mean, what else does it say? So there's not a lot. However, it does have a pretty decent sized hippocampus. So if we can kind of get in there by removing, I'm going to start by removing this part at the top of the cortex here, carefully. And we see some of this tissue here wrapping around. So the hippocampus is going to come basically around like this into the temporal lobe. And so we can see some of this tissue here that looks like it might be part of that connection. So if we strip off a little more of this, that's what we're looking for. We're looking for wrapping around. We see a little bit more here. We see this right here wrapping around into the temporal lobe. Because recall, the hippocampus, both the hippocampus and the amygdala are going to be in there, but they're really hard to find. It looks like I'm slicing through it too. But they're really hard to find because they're not like the most common images we look at the brain are basically the outside surface, right, and the sagittal cut. So it's difficult to see there. And so depending on how good you are spatially, it can be tough. So we can see it kind of here. Here we go. So we pull this off. We can see the tissue wrapping around in here. And here it is, wrapping around into the temporal lobe, and then the amygdala would be in here. So we go back and we look at the brain we have not cut up, and the structures that we see here. I mentioned here was the pineal, the pituitary is down here. You've got your corpus callosum, thalamus, hypothalamus, mammillary bodies, optic chiasm, so the frontal lobe, pons, medulla, and brainstem. All right, that's the basics of the sheep brain. There's a lot more detail that we can go into. Static pictures are going to probably work just as well, because in a lot of ways it's not easy to see everything in this kind of structure, especially with the nerves. So we'll look at some images to get a better idea of those. Thank you.